Listen up. We are back with another episode of the Construction Mentor Podcast. My name is Ike. I am your host. You can catch me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and now you can catch me on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. I'm going across all social media platforms to help spread the message and to make sure that everyone's aware of some cool tools that I got coming out. If you've heard the podcast before, you know what we're here to do. We're here to promote the construction industry as a viable path to affluency and a better life. If you're already in the industry, we want to give you the tools and the exposure that you need to take your career to the next level. And coming in the next 2 weeks, I have some content, some education coming out that's much cheaper than going to college. And not to sound like some shiny car, greasy car salesman, or promote one of these click funnels that you see, because everybody's selling courses these days. I can tell you this: 20 years in the construction industry, over 300 hours putting this course together. It is very well thought out. It's all applicable information. And to be honest with you, it's going to be a lot. It's a 40-hour course, but you will be better for it, especially if you want to get into the general contracting world and the big boy world of commercial construction. So with that, we have a guest today. I was just saying, I'm the first person privileged to have him on my podcast. We got Melvin Martin. Martin, what's the official name of the business, Melvin? Martin Family
Craftsmen.
Martin Family Craftsmen. So you may have seen him. He's blown up just in the last couple of weeks. He's got over 30,000 followers now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the uniqueness of his content, how he gets his family involved. And I want to talk about all that today. So, Melvin, how are you?
I am fine. I am blessed. It's nice to be here with you today.
And so, Melvin, obviously your content is different than almost any other contractor that I've seen out there. And I think it has to do with how your kids and how your family are woven into that content. So can you just talk about just your business in general, like where it's at today and how you kind of got your kids involved?
Yeah. So as today, I have basically, it's just me and my two sons that work with me. And that's been really, really awesome. We moved here to Kentucky about 3 years ago. And when I moved here, dude, I decided I'm going to get my children involved in my business and not have employees. And so that's what I did. I had, at one point, I had 7 employees. And I was not very good at delegating, things out. And I just simply got burned out. And then I downsized. That was probably about maybe 6 years ago. And all this time, I did have my oldest son working with me, and he started working with me when he was 12, and he is now 20. And so he's been with me a long time on the job site. And but hey, I just decided that I just was burned out, and I was at a place where I needed to either get bigger or then downsize and just do things with my boys and get my family more involved in my business. And so that's what I opted to do, and that's where we are today, and it's been a blessing.
So what exactly is your specialty? Is it home renovations, additions, new builds, general contracting? Where do you draw the line to maybe subbing out to an electrician or a plumber or anything like that?
Yeah, so our main thing is residential construction, and we do probably about 50-50. We do probably 50% new construction and about 50% remodeling. In the new construction, we actually do a lot of trim. We do a lot of finish work. We do some framing, but we kind of specialize in finish work, and so that's what we do mostly, and then remodeling. So yeah, about 50-50 is what we do.
So would you say you're going to new homeowners, or are you getting contracted out by a general that as like the finished carpenter, or both?
Both, but mainly for just the homeowners. I don't work through a lot of general contractors. Mainly, I just get in contact, well, they get in contact with me, the homeowners, and they're looking for a finished carpenter, finished trimmer, and someone to finish out their projects. And so they get a hold of me.
So one thing that you said that I found was interesting, and I always try to preach this about the construction industry: when you have that skill set, gives you a different kind of freedom, right? You can start your own business, you can upsize, downsize, you can do whatever you want, you can go work for somebody else. But one of the things is that you can move, right? I've been able to move from Boston to California to New Jersey to New York to back to Boston, back down to Florida. I'm about to move to Texas. And, anywhere that I've gone, there's a huge demand. I get no problem. I throw my resume up on the table and, I get a bunch of people there. Where'd you move from to Kentucky, and what was that like? Did you struggle to find work at first? How'd you put food on the table?
So I moved from northeast Iowa, and I moved down here to Kentucky, and I had a pretty good clientele built up there in northeast Iowa. And when I moved here, actually, the funny thing is I had a guy call me before I moved because he heard I was moving from this area, and it was a friend of mine that lived here, and he gave him my number, and he called me and said he'd like me to build his house, and I didn't know this guy really, and my friend recommended me to him. So I actually had a house to build here before I moved here. And so my point is that when you do good work, and you're honest, and you're out there doing every project like it's your own project, um, I don't care where you move. Like you said, like you were saying, I don't care where you move or what you do, where you go, and whether it's in the construction field, doesn't matter what you do necessarily. If you do a good job, you're going to find work and you're going to be busy. I was busy. So when I moved here, I did not have a problem finding work. I did work a little bit for another contractor doing some bidding for him, but I pretty soon I had way more work than I needed, and I just quit. And so, yeah, it didn't take me long.
Yeah, I think, I could take this in a bunch of different directions. And yeah, you do inject a little bit of faith into your content, and it seems to be a big part of your family life. And we can get to that. But it's funny how sometimes you either want to do something, or, you feel like you're being pushed in a certain direction, and then all of a sudden that bridge is made nice and easy. And that, some people call it the universe, other people call it God. And I feel like I have the same thing coming to Texas, and I don't know that I acknowledged it at the fork in every road of my life. But then when you look back, it's like as straight as an arrow, right? It's all clear right when you look backwards. So, what? Take me back to the beginning. Like, Melvin, when did you get into the industry? Was it in high school? Is that something your father passed down to you? How did that start for you?
Yeah, no, it was not actually. My father, he owned a small business, but he was a taxidermist actually. And I worked with him in his shop, or in our shop. I grew up in his shop, of course, and so I helped in there as soon as I could, do small things. But he was not a builder, and when I turned 16, he gave me an option to either he told me I can either get a job or I can get more involved in his business. And I didn't have the patience to be a taxidermist, and so I opted to go get a job, and so I did, and then I worked in a factory for 2 years until I was 18, and then I started in the construction industry. I grew up in a very religious culture, similar to Amish, which they call Mennonite. So I only went through 8th grade education in a private school. And so I got out of school, at the age of 14, 15 actually. And then I got a job at 16, and I was in the construction industry at 18.
Wow. Okay. And, what's interesting about that is that you don't have the patience to do that. But you do have the patience to do some finished carpentry, which to me, I'm a general contractor. Everything that I do is from the neck up now, has been for a long time. But when I was in a trade, or if I ever do put a tool belt on, demo and like real rough labor is where I excel, because I don't have any patience of any kind, and I have no finesse at all. Any kind of finished work in my house, you'd walk in and you could, if you walked in my bathroom right now and you looked at the shiplap that I did, you could point out a few things wrong with it. It's all I ever see when I step into my bathroom. So,
Yeah.
so you were, so a lot of people would say, eighth grade education, not really set up for success, yet here you are, a business owner that's pretty much able to take your talents, able, able to take your talents anywhere. So when you were coming up and you were 18, what was that like? Like, was it mentorship? Did you just land with the right company? How did you find a way to excel, and how did you, I guess, learn? And what should somebody be looking for if they're coming up in the same situation?
Mhm. Yeah, so I started working for a company doing exterior remodeling, mostly residential. And the funny thing is they put me on a crew with an older gentleman that worked there for several years. And he kind of took a liking in me. I don't know what it was, but he kind of took a liking in me. And another employee there told me that he never shows anybody anything.
Mm,
But he took me under his wing because he liked me for some reason. And he showed me, I mean, I learned, I was young, and basically I was an apprentice, basically, under him. Like he treated me as an apprentice and he showed me so many things and I just absorbed it all. I learned by doing things. That's my primary way to learn. And so he would just throw me at something and tell me a little bit, show me how to do it, and then I would do it, or I'd watch him, and boy, I picked it up, and he just took me under his wing, and he was really the one that got me started in the construction industry. And I worked with him for about a year and a half, probably almost 2 years.
so you're on the other side of that now, right? You're an expert. You're running your own business. You've been doing this for 2, 3 decades now, and I can almost guarantee you that when you went from a 7 crew and you had a 7-man crew and you were thinking about growing, shrinking, what should I do? And it's funny because the more people that I talk to, I think they get frustrated with the thought of growing or adding people to their crew or maintaining a large crew, anything more than like 4 or 5 guys. I think it's because of managing the locker room and managing talent and keeping people happy, and just dealing with a lot of young people that don't want to be there or don't show certain qualities that you may have shown in the 80s and 90s, right? What would you say to a young person today if they were to come work for Martin Family Craftsmen, or what do you tell your sons are some simple things that they should do without knowing anything about a trade? Let's assume that they've never worked a day in their life. What are some things that some young people should be doing when they show up to show people that they're worth mentoring?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is showing interest in what's going on, you know, because people are not going to pour into you if you're just showing up because you want the money, or it's not about the money necessarily. I mean, it can be eventually, but if you show up and you take an interest and you are there to learn, that is the biggest thing, because I've had employees that were just there for the paycheck, and they were not there to learn. And
Mm,
I'm sorry, I don't pour into people like that, right? And so, I don't really wouldn't really care if you go on to be your own business, or if you stay, if you're working for me, let's say you come work for me, right? If you're going to stay with my company, great. But I would also not care if you start your own business, if I see that you have the potential to learn and want to learn and have the desire to learn and want to work hard and do what it takes to get to the place where you can eventually make good money and maybe have your own company. But it takes a lot of hard work, and you got to be willing to learn, and you got to be willing to make mistakes. Our goal, or not our goal, but our theme, as a family on the job site is, if you do something and you make a mistake, you fix it, right? And so that's the biggest thing, taking responsibility of what you're doing, and
Hmm.
what you're working on, and just doing it the best that you have the ability to know how. Maybe you are, don't know much, but just do it to the best of your ability, and don't be afraid to ask questions, and be willing to learn.
Melvin, are you into sports at all?
I love football. I love watching
Okay,
football.
so
I play football with my sons, but I'm not really into any
I saw that
sports.
you had a little Turkey Day action. You guys
That's
were throwing the
right.
football around a little bit.
That's right.
So it's funny because, if I can't say this enough, and I do want to get to this at some point, but when I look at Melvin's content, Western society and Western culture, which I love America, big America guy. But we have gotten away from a certain family structure. And I think that you show, things the way that they should be. Right. And I have two young children, both are in bed right now. And, that one's 2.5, one's 7 months. And that's the culture that I want to cultivate for them. And I think maybe 20, 30 years ago, a lot of people would have said that was, weird. But I think if you look where we are now, I don't think I want to be normal. So, right. And I think that a lot of people are seeing the same thing. And, when I say that, you have an alternate, what a lot of people would consider an alternate education preference for your family. I'm sharing the same. You bring your kids to work. I was brought to work when I was younger, and I was exposed to job sites. It's a great way to teach them. It's a great way to learn. And, your son, who's 20 years old now, and the one that's younger than that, have a skill set that they can keep them employed. But I also envision I was just talking about this with my wife, us playing backyard football on Thanksgiving one day. Hopefully in a couple of years. I pray that my son obviously is happy and healthy, but I pray that he loves football as much as I do. I'm trying to think, where was I going to go with that? Oh, I know where I was going to go with that. Oh, so football. That's why I brought it up. One of the things that I loved about football when I was a kid was the notion of if you're going to make a mistake, make it going 100 miles an hour and rip somebody's head off. Right now, you don't want to rip somebody's head off in construction. That's usually a bad thing, right? But if you're going to make a mistake, then do it at full effort. Right? Have an honest effort. Really try to do the right thing, and don't wait. Don't hem and haw, move left, move right. Take a step forward. Take your best step forward, and give it your best crack. And this ended for me a few years ago when, I knew that I always had the excuse, like, oh, I didn't know. I thought I was doing the right thing, and I was comfortable with that. Right. Because it's like a card that you can play. Like, I'm sorry, nobody told me, I've never seen it done that way, or I just messed up, I'm sorry. Eventually that runs out. Right now I'm in my 30s and mid 30s, and I'm a full blown adult. And when I fuck up, I have to own it, and I have to take responsibility for it. And that hurts a little extra because people expect me to be an expert now. But I think it's one of those things, when a lot of young people are out there, a lot of the complaints that I get are, number one, they feel like people don't want to teach them because they feel like some of the experts or some of the older guys are hoarding information to kind of hold power over them. And then number two, they're afraid to be, and maybe it's the culture, the way that we raise people today, but they're afraid to be wrong. Like, they're afraid to take responsibility. They want other people to literally like put the food in their mouth and then chew for them. You know what I mean? So I don't know if you see that same parallel, but if you're going to make a mistake, just give it a hard effort.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, don't be afraid to make a mistake. Most people, like you said, are afraid to make a mistake, and they're just, don't be afraid to mess up, because believe it or not, that's how you become great, and that's how you become good at whatever you're doing, is when you make a mistake and then you learn from that mistake. So yeah, that's a 100% parallel, and I love that. That's good.
So when it comes to carpentry, one of the things that I screwed up royally when I was a young project superintendent was door hardware. I think that door frames and hardware are particularly difficult. And the way that you learn and the way that you become an expert in all the different door hardware types and all the things that can go wrong with door hardware is usually somebody screws it up. So
That's right.
Because eventually it'll happen, and eventually it'll hurt real bad. It'll hurt your project. It'll hurt your schedule. It'll hurt your bottom line. But like you said, there's no better way to learn and to burn something into your memory than to feel a little pain from it. So Melvin, tell me, as you got older, so now you're in your 20s, did you start your own thing? Did you bounce around? Did you try different niches? What were you doing in your 20s? And I imagine you were starting a family by then, right? At some point in your 20s?
Yes, that's correct. So I worked for about 5 different companies doing various different construction, commercial. I worked in commercial for a while. I worked in agricultural construction for a while. And then I got into residential, like framing houses and building houses. And that's what I enjoyed the most. And so that's kind of where I went, with my career, so to speak, because that's what I love doing. Was the residential construction, building houses. At that point, I was just framing houses. But yeah, so I worked for 5 different companies, and we got married when I was 22 and my wife was 20. And at that point, I was framing houses. And I thought that, maybe I could, do my own business, have my own business sometime. But at that point, I wasn't quite ready. And I still needed to learn a lot. And so I just kept learning and kept working for other companies until, let me think, it was about 2 years after we got married when we moved to Northeast Iowa. And then I worked for my brother-in-law doing concrete, and I hated concrete. That was just the worst part of the construction job site, right? And so I worked for him doing concrete, and I just didn't like it. And then a friend of mine asked me if I would build his house for him. And so that's the first house I built was for a friend of mine, and I had very little tools, I just had the basics, and I stored my tools in an old rusty cattle trailer, actually. And so I started out with literally nothing. But I knew how to build a house, because I built many houses by that point. And so I had the skill and I had the know-how, and I enjoyed it. And at that point, of course, we had 2 small children, right? And so I had one guy that I hired actually to help me with that house, and just me and him built that first house. And then from that, I got another job and got another house, and then I hired another guy. And so, within probably 3 or 4 years, I had 5 employees and was building quite a few houses.
You highlight something again when I talk about freedom in your career and your lifestyle and whatever kind of life you want to build for yourself. One of the unique things about construction is the different career paths that you can take and the different things you can get exposure to, and that it doesn't mean that it's the end or you're signing up, you're stuck your whole life, right? Like if you're in software sales or some of the whatever office desk jobs people can have with whatever useless degree they have, but but in construction, you've even alluded to a few different opportunities that you had. You could have went commercial, you could have went residential. I'm sure you've probably had offers to be a project superintendent for a GC. You could have gone into concrete. When you went into concrete, just like when I was in high school and I was a roofer, that sucked. I didn't like it. I have friends that make millions of dollars doing roofs, and they love it, and that's what they do, and they've been doing it for generations. Good for them, wasn't for me. But when you do stuff like that, one thing happens. Number one, you find out you don't like it. And like you said, you think concrete work sucks, so it's not for you. Just like roofing wasn't for me. But what do we know about? I know about roofs, you know about concrete. And especially when it comes to how your trade that you do like ties to concrete, right? So number one, every house has to have a foundation, so you can do that. But what does the connection details look like if you sub somebody out? How do you make sure that they're doing their job right? And you become better at coordinating your trade to the trade that goes before you, the trade that you're going to stand on. And I just think that construction compared to other industries, there's just a huge benefit in all the different roads and paths that you can take, and you can dabble in a little something for a while. And then, if you decide that you don't like it, you can move on. So I think it's something important and to talk about. So how did you go from then the framing, what I would call rough carpentry, to finish? Were you getting that experience along the way? I feel like most people start in rough and then transition to finish.
Yeah. So when I was building that first house I built, I did it all myself, other than, of course, electrical and the plumbing and the insulation and, drywall. I didn't do that, but I did the finish part of it. And see, I loved detail because I did work with my dad in his taxidermy shop. And so that is very detail oriented, and I did like that. But I didn't like what he was doing, and I just didn't have the patience for that. And so I did trim that first house, and I didn't know extremely a lot about trim at that point. I knew the basics, and but I did okay on it, and I loved that part of it. And so that's kind of how I got into the finish end of it, by just doing them on, because I did my houses start to finish basically. And I did most of the work, and my guys did most of the work, except for the electrical and plumbing and drywall and insulation and, of course, concrete. I wasn't going to do the concrete.
Yeah, right. So now you have little kids, you're starting your own business, you had a bunch of tools and a cattle trailer. How'd you grow the business? Did you take out a loan to buy more equipment? Were you taking the cash and trying to make sure that you had a steady cash flow, maybe weekly invoicing, bi-weekly invoicing, and investing back into tools and equipment? How'd you do that?
Yeah, so that's how I did it. I did mostly just through my cash flow point. As I was making money, I would invest that money back into the business, of course, taking out, for my own family's needs, right? But I just did put that money back into the business and bought more tools, and eventually bought a bigger trailer. At one point, when I did grow, I grew pretty rapidly, in probably a period of maybe 3 to 4 years. I went from 2 or 3 employees to 7. And so at that point there, I did loan some money and bought another trailer because I needed 2 sets of tools, so to speak. And so I did loan some money at that point. But I still feel like the best way is to, be able to grow with your business. And as your business grows, as your cash flow increases, and as you make more money, putting that back into your business and buying more tools and more equipment or whatever. That's still the best way, I think.
And Melvin, if you don't mind me asking, whether you had 2 guys or 7 guys, or maybe what you're doing now with your sons, what was your best year, revenue wise?
So my best year, revenue wise, as far as gross revenue, was when I had 7 guys. But when actually profit wise, I made more money when I had 2 or 3 employees, or than my sons working with me, 2 or 3 guys.
I had a funny feeling you were going to say that.
That's exactly how it is. Yeah.
So, and why do you think that is? Because I think a lot of people, especially young people, they think scale, right? They think more guys, more projects means, and it does. It means more revenue, right? Because you're going to be able to take on more contracts and more work, but that doesn't necessarily mean profit. So what was that struggle? What lessons did you learn that caused that disparity?
Yeah, so kind of what I learned is that your efficiency drops, right? When you have too many uh, people working for you, and so then you have to start uh, operating differently. What I mean by that is you have to start, you know, getting your guys to come to the shop every morning and meet there, and you just lose an hour. You know, you're driving from the shop to the job site. When I had a couple guys working for me, everybody just came to the job site. Just things like that, and just your efficiency drops. And believe it or not, you would think that if you can make more, you know, do more jobs, have more guys, then you'll make more money. And that's not necessarily the case. I do think that at some point that does happen. And I think if I would have delegated more, and I would have pushed past the point of 7 employees and maybe went up to 10 or 15 and then delegated out to different people to, you know, manage things. I think there is a point where you can make more money, but there again, I had a few buddies of mine that were doing that in our area there, and I looked at their life, and their family life was not very good. Their marriage was not very good. They were continuously working, continuously pouring themselves into their business, and they were ignoring their families. And that's not a good recipe. And so I didn't want to go there. I didn't want my family to go down that road. So that's why I downsized, and a couple, 2, 3 employees. And now my son's working for me, and it's just been a blessing, and it's been a good journey, but it was a hard journey.
So I think a lot of people would say that once you get over 4, that's when you need team leaders, and then you kind of get into a hierarchical management structure. And if you're managing more than 4, then efficiencies go down. You can't keep track on quality. I'm sure you could tell me stories of many things. Like you said, you got to rip it out and do it again. And no easier way to lose money than to do that. So,
That's right.
you know, you went exactly where I wanted to go. So it was a perfect segue. How did you balance the family? I mean, you got 7 kids?
I have
Okay.
7 children. That is correct.
seven children. You know, when I had 1, that was overwhelming, and now I have 2, and I can't believe that 1 was ever overwhelming. And sometimes I get overwhelmed with 2. Can't even imagine what 7's like. You know, I think there's a perception out there that if you want to be successful in this industry, you have to give up your family life. I see it. If you scroll through my comments, which I can't keep, you know, I have some posts with tens of thousands of comments and people arguing about this, and I do my best to combat it. You know, the argument is that if you want to have any kind of success, then you can't have a family life, and everybody's divorced. And if we're being honest, you know, I've had many episodes about this. You know, our culture in construction is a problem, whether it's ambition or alcohol or drugs or just worshiping the wrong things in life. You know, I think guys get caught up in it. So how did you balance having a wife and 7 kids and leading a successful marriage and home life with fluctuating, what I would call fluctuating business?
Yeah. So basically, what happened was when I was in that very religious culture, the Mennonites, similar to the Amish, I had, I wasn't, so we grew up, I don't know if you know much about Amish, but of course we didn't have TV, you know, we didn't have radio, we didn't have computers, but I did have a computer because I eventually needed a computer. And so that was against the church rules. And I had a cell phone that I was not supposed to have. And but my business was growing so rapidly that I felt I needed those things to compete, you know, and to keep growing my business. And I was going down the road that you just talked about that most young men go down. I was going down that same exact road. And then I left the Mennonites and I went to a different Mennonite church, that we were allowed to have cars and get, you know, I drove horse and buggy uh, because we were very similar to Amish. And so we were allowed to have cars. And so I joined that church. And so I could drive a car. So I didn't have to have someone driving me around all the time. And so that I could have a computer and have a cell phone, because they were allowed to have computers and cell phones. And so I joined that church. And then technically, so I don't know if you know much about Amish culture or Mennonite culture, but in that church, we were not allowed to have radios or listen to the radio supposedly, but they didn't make us tear out our radios out of our vehicles. They just made us take our
Mm.
antennas off of our cars. You were not allowed to have your antenna on your car.
Wow.
So I was a little bit of a rebel, right? And so I took a coat hanger, a metal coat hanger, and I wrapped it around where your antenna fastens to your car. And I wrapped that around there, and I wrapped it around my underneath my hood and made it that it touched my hood. And so I could pull local radio stations, and I was listening to the radio that I wasn't really supposed to be listening to. And I thought, I was a Christian. I thought, I went to church and all that. And I started listening to local Christian radio station. And I started listening to Dr. David Jeremiah, he's on the radio today still. And I started listening to him, and I just, you know, I couldn't believe that. I thought when someone would have asked me if I was going to heaven, I would have probably said, I'm not sure. And so I didn't have assurance of that, and I just was
Mm.
very uh, actually struggling in my life because I was so busy. My marriage was struggling, and my family life was very struggling at that point. And I just didn't know what to do. And so finally, one day, after about a year, God working with me, I gave my life to Jesus Christ, and that changed my whole life.
Wow. So I'm vaguely familiar with Mennonites. I think most people are familiar with Amish, and I did know some of those things. And I mean, one of my favorite movies is Kingpin, so I got a little bit of the knowledge from that. If you've ever seen that movie, but so I would have thought that growing up as a Mennonite, you would have already given your life to Jesus Christ, or was that just because you were born into it and you didn't know anything else? And when you got a little bit of exposure to the outside world, then you did a little self-reflection and a little analysis, and that's when you made the jump to truly give yourself to Christ. Is that what happened basically?
Yeah, so I didn't understand. I didn't have a relationship with God, or didn't have a relationship with Jesus. I knew, I was taught about Jesus Christ, but I didn't know what it meant to be born again and to truly live for Christ and to give your life to Christ and surrender to Him. And I was still living for myself, in many selfish ways.
Mm.
And so I had the knowledge, the head knowledge of Jesus Christ and of God, but I didn't have the heart. It wasn't in my heart. And so I was just religious. Um,
So for
yeah.
somebody that may be struggling, and I don't think I don't mean somebody that's in Mennonite culture or Amish culture or even Christian culture. What was that reflection like? Like at what point? What would you say to somebody that may feel lost or not know what to do? For instance, I would say to hold yourself accountable, be honest with yourself, but give yourself a little bit of grace, and then take better action today. So what did that look like for you? Like what type of reality slapped you in the face? And if somebody was in a similar situation, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah. So the reality that slapped me in the face was that I could not keep living life and doing life for myself. And my marriage was a wreck, and I was very selfish, and I just didn't know what to do, and I had no power over sin. I had a huge anger issue, actually, and I was under a lot of stress, and so anger was a big problem in my life, and I would get angry, very angry. And unfortunately, with my own children and my own wife, and I just had no power. Every time I would get angry, I would say I'm not going to do this again, but I was trying to do it in my own power, in my own flesh, and that's not possible. And so I would do it again. I would get angry again. And so I just, after, going through this cycle in a downward spiral, I just could not take it anymore. And I just had to surrender my life. And all this time I was listening to the radio and hearing, you know, different preachers, and the word of God being was working in my life, and so I just surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, and that is where uh, my whole vision changed from, trying to be somebody, and trying to, just thinking, like you were saying earlier, that my business was everything. Money was
Mm.
everything, and success was everything, and I was at that point. I was okay with, before I gave my life to Jesus Christ. I was okay with, doing whatever it took to be successful. But after I gave my life to Christ, my vision changed, and that is when actually I started going down a different path. And so I would say, if you struggle with anger or just not knowing whether you're going to go to heaven or not, it's just a matter of surrendering to Jesus Christ. What he did on the cross for us, it is finished, and there's nothing more that needs to be done. He died for your sins and for my sins, and there's nothing else that needs to be done, and you just need to believe that by faith,
Mm.
and rest in that. And so,
Yes. So to draw a parallel for people that may not believe, although I got to tell you, the more people that I have on the podcast, the more they want to talk about God, and I'm okay with it. I was an atheist up until 2 years ago, but what I would say to somebody, to just kind of draw a parallel, it usually goes faith, family, country, or insert whatever you want in third place, but you're in that order, right? And
right.
the reason that is because you have to have a greater purpose. Your greater purpose not controls, but I guess the motivator behind all of your actions, including leading your family and serving your
Mm,
family. So,
that's right.
what would you say? How does your craft fit that purpose? So, if you're not chasing money today, what is it? And by the way, I would love to hear what any of your old Mennonite friends would think about you having a social media platform that you're blowing up on right now. That's got to be a total change of events.
Yeah.
Although they probably don't know about it. So
Right. They don't
so
probably.
yeah. So bring it back to the question: your craft, and the way that you've structured your family and the way that you're bringing it into the business. Does that serve a purpose that you're serving ultimately your faith with?
Yeah. So it does. It really does. I just working with my boys, and getting my boys involved. So when I gave my life to Christ, uh, I started thinking differently, and I was like, man, I need to, get my family more involved in what I'm doing, because the road I'm going is not going to end very well. And that is when I started bringing my oldest son, Sean, with me on the job site, and I started teaching him things, and he started learning. And um, yeah, that at first I was very skeptical about that. Really, I was, because I didn't know what my customers are going to say, if I have my son with me. And, but you know what? I've never heard anything negative from any of the people we were working for. I never heard anything negative about that. They all encouraged me and said, "Man, we've never seen anybody out here, working with their son." Um, and they encouraged me to keep doing it. And so it was always positive about that. And so I started realizing that the purpose in my life in doing construction is more than just being successful and making money, but it's about making an impact to society and making an impact uh, that shows people that there is more to work than just making money and being successful, but you can um, do a good job and you can be honest and you can do those things for the glory of God. And when you do that, when you work for the glory of God instead of for the glory of yourself, um, believe it or not, He blesses that. And when you have that perspective, um, your your whole everything changes, so to speak, in the way you work and the way you do things and the way you treat people, the way you treat your customers, the way you treat your employees if you have some or your son, and so just just and another thing is that we were different, right? I mean, because you know how it is on the job site. There's a lot of bad things that go on the job site.
Hmm.
A lot of swearing and just negative language, negative things. A lot of rough
Hmm.
people, right, on the job site.
Hmm.
And we were not. We were different. Um, and people seeing that, and that is probably the biggest thing that I would say uh, that our faith incorporates into what we do is that we are a light for Jesus Christ, and we don't go out there trying to do that, but it's just who we are, and it goes to the glory of God.
Well, three things happen. I always say when you shine a light, number one, darkness leaves, right?
That's right.
Darkness can't exist in the presence of light. Number two, um, you can see things. You can see, ways that you're meant to serve your purpose. And number three, people can see you that need it,
That's
right?
right.
So good for you for shining that. And what I will say, just one thing that you missed, by serving a purpose greater than yourself, that's how you ultimately get rewarded. Whether it's God, whether it's the universe, that's how it's going to come back to you. And that's what your ultimate purpose should be. It should be greater than yourself. But one
That's
thing
correct.
that I think is beautiful with the way that you're working right now and the way that you're raising your kids is you're giving them a skill that will enable them to be free. And I
Mhm.
mean that literally for the rest of their life.
That's right.
Your boys are not going to be reliant on anybody
That's right.
to support them, to put food on their table,
Mhm.
or anything like that. And because they have that skill set, they can then turn and serve their purpose, whatever that may be. And
Mhm.
it seems like they're following in the footsteps. So have they been? Let me take a step back. So you homeschool your kids, right? And you've basically
That's
made
correct.
this part of their education. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. So it is the biggest part of our education, actually. Now, our boys still do school, books, right? And
Mm-hmm.
but yes, we did incorporate our business into our education. And no, you're dead on. I did miss that. That is right. My oldest son, Sean, he's married now, and they're about ready to have their first child, and so we're excited about that. Uh,
Congratulations,
yeah,
Grandpa.
thank you. That's right. Well, that's actually uh, our third grandchild.
Oh
So,
wow. Okay. Well, you got
but it,
seven. You got seven straight coming from you. So you're gonna have a lot of people underneath you. So
yeah,
good for you.
yeah, that's a blessing. But what I was going to say is that so he was able to buy a house, right? And I helped him do that, buy his own house about a year before he got married, and it was a fixer upper. It needed a lot of work, but he knew how to do it, and he did that all by himself. He fixed that house up and got it ready to move into. And actually, he was living in it while he was doing it. He moved out of our house before he got married, actually, and lived in that house and fixed it up. And him and a friend of his. So, but yeah, that is correct. He had the skill sets to be able to provide a house for his own wife at 19. He was actually
Yeah.
18 and a half at that point. So yeah, that is correct. You will have a skill set. You will, if you learn those things, you have a skill set that will able you to not only work on your own things and be able for your own, you know, well-being, but also be able to make money and to provide for your family.
And the other five, are they looking up to the older siblings and they're like chomping at the bit to get on the job?
Yeah, they are. They love it on the job, right? And they like going with their dad. Hey, the simple fact is that um, love is spelled Time, right? And so
Mm.
time, and that doesn't always mean playing football in the backyard, right? I mean, that is part of it. But being able to go with your dad on the job site and be able to work with him on a daily basis, obviously if they're doing school, they can't go with me every day, but
Mhm.
when they can go with me, they look very forward to it. And yes, they're chomping at the bit to be able to be out there every day.
Girls too?
And the girls, yeah. So my oldest is a daughter, and then it's my oldest son, Sean, that works with me. And then my second daughter, my oldest daughter did not work a lot with me on the job site because that was when I had all my employees and I was going through this, transition and
Mm.
through this battle. I was in the heat of it. And but my second daughter, she worked with me, but she just got married about 5 weeks ago, and so she's now living in South Dakota and has her starting her own family. And so, but yeah, she worked with me for, I don't know, probably a year maybe or so that she worked with me. So yeah, she enjoyed it too.
That's incredible. And how old's the youngest?
My youngest is 7.
7. Okay. Oh no, we got no more coming, right? We're
Nope,
stopping at stopping
we're
at
done.
7.
We're done.
That's
We're,
awesome. Melvin, I think there's a reason why your content is blowing up, right? And you're going to surpass me in the follower count, and you're probably by the end of the year, you're probably going to have 100,000 followers. I think people are hungry for that content. I think that the leadership that you provide in your family, the time, that as you said, you're giving them that's how you love them, and I think that's what a lot of people need to get back to. And I think if there's anything that we realized maybe the last 4 years were good for, it was that awakening. Woke is a dirty word now, but
That's right.
I think a lot of people woke up like myself. You actually got me contemplating, like, am I doing the right thing in my career? Should I be leaving and starting my own contracting business? I have a license in HVAC. I could do it tomorrow, right? I can go and contract any job of any size that I want. But I do work for a large general contractor, and I have a great opportunity. But we are getting to the point where my son's 2.5. I have to start thinking about his education and what that looks like, and we're leaning towards homeschool right now. The good thing is that because of the skill set that I have, I have options, right? And I'm of means that I can do that when a lot of people are not right now. So,
Mm-hmm. Well,
uh,
you'll know when the time is right. Let's just put it that way, right?
yeah, and we're moving to a community that has a bunch of options. And the schools that they do have, even there's some hybrid homeschool options where it's 2 days a week, and then there's a curriculum that you follow, but it's all entrepreneurship based. And I could go on and on about it, but I think that it's great options. And especially since I live in Florida now, going to Texas. I think that when you get out of the Northeast, which is where I came from, I'm from Boston, my wife's from Philly. It's just different culture up there. So, um, you know, we're coming up on an hour. I always like to try to keep it to an hour. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? Any other advice, whether it be to a father, to kids coming up in the industry, people that want to start their own business? Is there anything that Melvin would like to give to the world before we sign off?
Yeah, I would say just don't be afraid to just go out there and do it. And just, it does seem scary. I'm talking about starting your own business. it does seem scary to start your own business and not sure if be able to provide for your family and if it's going to work. And but I would say, just get go ahead and do it, but remember that it takes a lot of hard work, and mainly to keep your perspective in the right order, right? And keeping family and faith first, and work next after that, right? And incorporating if you can incorporate your family into your work. And just don't be scared to do it. Don't be afraid to be different, because um, being different is okay, right? I mean, it's just okay, and most people are very uncomfortable with being different, but it's okay to be different.
Is that a balance that you've had to work on with your kids as they come up and they're, different than, I would say, most kids are being the way they're being raised today?
Yeah, it is, definitely. Um, we're probably a little more shielded from it than some people out there, So, but yeah, it is definitely something that you have to continuously work on with your children, and just tell them that it's okay to be different, and that we're going to do things differently than most other people in the culture. And believe it or not, if it involves you as a dad, they'll be okay with it, right?
Mm.
And so that's the main thing, is just make sure that if you do decide to, take your own children involved in your business, just make sure that you involve them, not like let them be part of the decision making of what you're going to do, or how we're going to do this, and get them involved. And for the young person, I would say, that is out there in the industry of construction, whatever it may be, just be willing to learn and do a good job, and show up at the job site and wanting to um, do your best, and you will be okay.
Yeah, I think as long as, like you said, always have that perspective, serving a purpose outside of yourself, not serving yourself, then you'll make the right decision and start your own business. And ultimately, pray like he's in control, act like you're in control
That's right.
every day.
That's
Right.
right.
So
That's right. Amen.
Melvin, I appreciate you coming on. Great conversation. I hope whoever needs to hear this hears it. And we'll cut up some clips and we'll share them. Make sure you go follow. What's the handle, Melvin? Martin Family Craftsmen.
Martin Family Craftsmen, and my son Sean. His site is Craftsman's Son. So
that's right. Great content on there. Feel good content. Little bit of God on there. And if you want to learn anything about a trade or get any insight to some fine carpentry, there's some good tips on there, and just really good construction content. So make sure you go follow them, make sure you like, and make sure you come back to this podcast, like it, subscribe, share it. Again, I'm here serving my purpose. I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do, have these types of conversations, and just help spread the good word. So again, this is Construction Mentor Podcast, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify. I should probably start posting these on X too. I don't know. Maybe I can get Elon to share that out. But Melvin, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure.